13 seconds. An ordinary kid from Dublin stepped into the octagon as if he already owned the story. Became a two-division champion, faced Mayweather, made millions, and transformed himself into one of the most explosive figures in sports. But what almost no one shows is the price he paid. The falls, the controversies, the excesses, and the question that still haunts his fans. Is McGregor still a living legend, or merely the shadow of the man who once ruled the world? Stay until the end, because the most unbelievable part of this story may not be the rise, but what happened after. And subscribe to the channel right now, because here every biography reveals the side the spotlight tries to hide. Conor Anthony McGregor was born on July 14, 1988, in Dublin, Ireland. But that day, no one heard entrance music, no one saw a shining championship belt, and no one imagined crowds screaming his name. He was simply a boy entering the world in modest circumstances, far from mansions, cameras, private jets, and million-dollar contracts. And here's something curious. Sometimes, the loudest stories begin in the silence of an ordinary life. Today, the name Conor McGregor sounds like the name of an empire. But before becoming a symbol of wealth, provocation, and power, he was just another boy trying to find his place in the world. But Dublin was not merely raising a child. It was preparing a character who would later make absolutely certain that he became impossible to ignore. McGregor grew up in Crumlin, an area of Dublin that helped shape much of what he would become. Because your surroundings can educate you even without a blackboard or a piece of chalk. It was there that he began developing the confidence that looked like arrogance to some people, but worked as fuel for him. From an early age, Conor never seemed satisfied with being just one of the crowd. He wanted to be noticed, he wanted to speak loudly, and he wanted to prove that something different was burning inside him. Many people believe the Notorious arrived fully formed in the UFC, powered by marketing and spotlights. But the truth is that the seed of that character had already been planted during his youth. And when a boy grows up believing that he must stand out at any cost, sooner or later he searches for an arena where he can turn that hunger into a weapon. Before MMA, before the walls of the octagon, and before packed press conferences, McGregor began in boxing, where he learned a simple and brutal lesson. The winner is not the man who throws the most punches, but the man who lands the best ones. It was along that path that one of the most dangerous trademarks of his career was born, a left hand that seemed to know the exact address of every opponent's chin. But power was never the only secret. The true difference was in his accuracy, his control of distance, his timing, and the look of a man who seemed able to see the punch before it happened. Conor did not need to throw punches around like confetti in a carnival. He needed to create the perfect moment. And when that moment arrived, suddenly, the direction of the fight changed. But his boxing ability was only the beginning, because there was still a young man living a life completely different from the one who swore he would someday live. Before becoming a champion, a celebrity, and a businessman, Conor worked as an apprentice plumber, waking up early, taking public transportation, and facing an exhausting routine that had nothing in common with the enormous dreams he carried inside him. Just imagine it. While most people saw an ordinary young man heading to work, inside him was someone already mentally rehearsing a life of packed arenas and championship belts resting on his shoulders. That contrast is one of the most powerful parts of his story, because McGregor did not emerge from a ready-made, beautiful, brightly lit path. He came from a place where most people learn to accept very little as their destiny, but he seemed to possess an almost inconvenient level of stubbornness, the kind that irritates the people around you because you keep talking about greatness when you do not yet have a single piece of evidence to prove it. And because ambition without money usually collides head-on with reality, the next stage of his life would become the kind of test that separates a dream from a fantasy. At the beginning of his career, McGregor faced serious financial hardship, the kind that can make any dream feel too expensive to continue pursuing. He even depended on social welfare in Ireland while trying to establish himself as a fighter, and that reveals a painful truth. Before people see you as a genius, they often see you as irresponsible. While some may have believed he was wasting his time, Conor was betting everything on a future version of himself that the world had not yet seen. Shortly before his UFC breakthrough, his finances were still extremely tight, and that is what makes his transformation so remarkable. The distance between anonymity and global fame was much shorter than most people imagine. But to leave the welfare line and join the ranks of the biggest names in sports, he had to prove himself inside the cage. where a beautiful speech cannot stop a takedown or block a punch. McGregor began his professional MMA career in 2008, still far removed from the luxury, camera flashes, and superstar aura that would later follow him everywhere. At that stage, he was simply a young fighter trying to survive in a brutal sport where talent helps, but does not pay the bills unless it is accompanied by victory. And that was when one characteristic began attracting attention. Many of his victories came by knockout, as though he were in a hurry to end the conversation before the judges had the chance to give their opinion. That run began building the image of an aggressive, dangerous, and unpredictable fighter, someone who did not enter the cage merely to compete, but to make his presence felt. But European MMA was still a smaller road for someone who wanted to conquer the world, and McGregor needed a stage large enough to contain his ego, his talent, and his ambition. Before reaching the UFC, McGregor shone in Cage Warriors, one of Europe's most important MMA organizations, and it was there that many people began to realize there was something different about that outspoken Irishman. He won championships in 2 weight classes, featherweight and lightweight, proving that his ambition could not be contained within a single division. Many people believe the champ story began in the UFC, but McGregor had already experienced that feeling before, almost as though he were rehearsing the script of his own legend. And make no mistake, becoming a 2-division champion before reaching the biggest stage in the world was no minor detail. It was a warning, almost a message written in enormous letters saying, "Pay attention to this man." When the UFC finally turned its attention toward him, Conor did not arrive asking for permission, Hardoman. He arrived like a man who already considered himself the owner of the party. In 2013, McGregor arrived in the UFC, and from the very beginning, he made it clear that he was not there to behave like a frightened newcomer staring nervously at the walls. He spoke like a star, walked like a star, and promised to dominate everything, even though he still had to prove that he could defeat the best fighters in the world. What was frightening was not merely his technical ability, it was his conviction, that almost absurd certainty of a man who seemed to have seen the future before everyone else. While many fighters tried to earn their place little by little, Conor made noise, created anticipation, and turned every appearance into a spectacle. But a promise in the UFC is like a bad check. It means nothing until it clears. And his first major test would come against a young fighter who would also become a legend. Still in 2013, McGregor faced Max Holloway and won by decision in a fight that, at the time, seemed like just another important step on his journey. But time has a beautiful habit of transforming small details into symbols, and that victory gained greater significance after Holloway also became a champion, a superstar, and a major figure in the sport. There they were, 2 young talents still far removed from everything they would later experience, sharing the octagon without knowing that years later their names would cross again in a much larger story. The fight showed a mature version of McGregor for that stage of his career, controlling the distance, managing the risks, and winning without needing a cinematic knockout. But the UFC does not forgive anyone who wants to climb too quickly, and soon Conor would have to prove that he was not only dangerous on his feet, but also capable of surviving when someone seriously tried to take him down. In 2015, McGregor faced Chad Mendes for the interim featherweight championship in a fight surrounded by doubt, mainly because many people still questioned how he would perform against high-level wrestlers. Mendes represented exactly the kind of problem the critics had identified: pressure, takedowns, ground control, and a style capable of turning a brilliant striker into a helpless passenger on a packed bus. Conor struggled, faced heavy pressure, and felt the weight of the fight, but he found the knockout when it seemed the story might become complicated. That victory mattered because it proved that McGregor was not merely a microphone, an expensive suit, and a collection of clever one-liners. He also knew how to win in the middle of chaos. And after capturing the interim championship, only one challenge remained: facing the true king of the division, a feared and dominant Brazilian who was accustomed to destroying dreams. Block 11. At UFC 194, McGregor faced Jose Aldo, one of the greatest featherweight champions in history, and the world expected a long, tense, and brutal war. But in only 13 seconds, Conor produced one of the most unbelievable moments in MMA history, hitting Aldo with such extraordinary precision that it looked rehearsed in slow motion. Aldo had been undefeated for years, was feared around the world, and carried an almost untouchable aura of dominance, until McGregor ended everything before many viewers had even finished settling into their couches. The phrase "precision beats power, timing beats speed" became the perfect summary of that night, because Conor did not win with strength alone. He won through reading the moment, remaining calm, and executing perfectly. After that, he was no longer a loud prospect. He became a global phenomenon. But the higher a man rises, the louder every word that leaves his mouth becomes.
Well, we're gonna have to see that again.
During his rise, McGregor became a master of psychological warfare, someone capable of turning a press conference into a battleground before the fight had even begun.
This guy TKOs people. When I knock people out, they don't move. They're not going, who the is that guy? Who the is that?
He provoked, humiliated, predicted knockouts, stared down opponents, and created a level of tension that made the audience feel as though the fight had started long before the opening round. Conor understood something that very few athletes understand so well. In modern sports, winning is not enough. You must make people want to watch. He did not merely sell fights, he sold stories, placing the audience inside a simple game. Cheer to see him win or pay to watch him get beaten. But every personality forged in fire can also be burned by it. And the first major crack in that aura would appear against an opponent who seemed completely immune to the performance. In 2016, McGregor faced Nate Diaz and suffered a memorable submission defeat, seeing his image of invincibility shattered in front of the world for the first time in the UFC. Nate did not appear intimidated, refused to buy into the character, and carried himself like a man saying, "All right, keep talking," while walking directly into battle. The defeat humanized Conor. He bled, became exhausted, made mistakes, was submitted, and discovered that even the most confident men must eventually confront their own limits. In the rematch, McGregor returned as a different fighter, more strategic, more controlled, and won a 5-round battle that demanded composure, endurance, and courage. That rivalry proved that he could fall and return. But soon a night in New York would transform his career into something greater than any provocation. In November 2016, at UFC 205, McGregor faced Eddie Alvarez and became the first fighter in UFC history to simultaneously hold championships in 2 different weight classes. It may have been the most perfect performance of his career, because Conor appeared to be operating on another frequency. Calm, precise, dominant, and theatrical. He dropped Alvarez with an ease that stunned many people, as though he were demonstrating that when the mind and body are perfectly aligned, talent becomes spectacle. That was the moment the nickname Champ Champ became permanently established in the UFC, not as a promise, but as a historic fact witnessed by a packed arena. But after winning 2 championship belts, McGregor began looking beyond the octagon, because dominating the UFC no longer seemed sufficient for him. In 2017, McGregor temporarily stepped away from MMA to face Floyd Mayweather in boxing, in one of the biggest sporting events of the decade. Even in defeat, he achieved something almost unthinkable. He stepped into the ring against one of the greatest boxers of all time without having followed a traditional professional boxing career. It was as though someone had crashed a black-tie gala wearing soccer cleats and still managed to become the center of attention, because Conor knew how to transform risk into spectacle. The fight earned him a fortune, expanded his fame, and elevated McGregor to a level that went far beyond the world of mixed martial arts. From that moment on, he was no longer merely a fighter. He was a global celebrity, and when an athlete becomes a brand, fighting becomes only one part of the business. After the championships and the millions, McGregor began investing in businesses, most notably his whiskey brand, Proper No. 12. He understood that his own image was a valuable asset, perhaps as powerful as his left hand, because people were not merely buying a product, they were buying a piece of the character. Conor did not become wealthy through fighting alone. He transformed his name into a brand, a product, a headline, and a money-making machine. That move demonstrated rare business intelligence. While many athletes depend entirely on performance, McGregor built an empire around the attention he was capable of generating. But money, fame, and excess can also disrupt a man's balance. And the next major chapter would prove that not every empire survives when it encounters an enemy forged from cold discipline. In 2018, McGregor faced Khabib Nurmagomedov in one of the most intense fights in UFC history. A rivalry that seemed to carry far too much gunpowder to fit inside the octagon. There were personal attacks, Cultural tension, insults, a hostile atmosphere, and an energy so charged that the fight felt more like a settling of scores than an athletic competition. Inside the cage, Khabib imposed his game, applied pressure, secured takedowns, controlled McGregor, and submitted him, exposing one of the Irishman's greatest weaknesses against elite grapplers. The widespread chaos after the fight made it clear that the night had crossed the boundaries of sport and entered a far darker territory. And with his aura of invincibility already shattered, Conor would still have to confront new ghosts, including an old rival who would return completely transformed. McGregor faced Dustin Poirier again years after defeating him. But this time, the story changed in a painful and symbolic way. Poirier was no longer the same young fighter who had lost in the past. He was more mature, stronger, colder, and ready to return some of the burden he had carried to the Irishman. Conor lost twice, and their third fight ended with a shocking leg injury in 2021. One of those scenes that can silence even the people who are not supporting him. The fracture was not merely a physical defeat. It was the symbolic collapse of the image of a man who had once seemed indestructible, as though his body had revealed what the myth was trying to hide. After that moment, the central question was no longer simply whether McGregor could still win, but whether he could still control his own story. Fame also brought countless controversies, and McGregor began making headlines not only because of his fights, but also because of problems, provocations, confrontations, and controversial behavior outside the octagon. The same intense personality that helped transform him into a superstar also began exacting a heavy price, because the character that sells millions can eventually become a golden prison. The Notorious was magnetic, loud, and profitable, but also unpredictable. And the public began following Conor with a mixture of fascination, criticism, and curiosity. This is an important part of his story. Sometimes, the very thing that takes someone to the top can push them downward with equal force if it is not brought under control. And now, after the falls, the fortune, the silence, the injuries, and the headlines, McGregor returns to the one place where no excuse can fight for him: the octagon. At UFC 329, McGregor returned to face Max Holloway in a rematch filled with history, expectation, and pressure, but the comeback that promised to reignite the legend ended cruelly. The fight had barely begun when Conor suffered a knee injury, fell more than once, and watched the contest get stopped in the first round at 1 minute and 9 seconds. It was not the epic defeat many had imagined, nor the war the fans expected. It was something quieter, more painful, and more symbolic, as though his body had finally demanded payment on a debt his pride was not yet willing to acknowledge. Holloway walked away victorious, but the lasting image was McGregor trying to endure while his own body said, "Enough," in front of millions of eyes searching for proof that the Notorious still existed. And perhaps that was the hardest blow of the night. Not losing to Max Holloway, but losing to time, to the scars, and to the question that now carries even greater weight. Does the legend still have one more run left inside him? Conor McGregor's story proves that a legend is not born complete. It is built through pain, courage, failure, and obsession. He came from nothing, faced the world, defeated giants, fell in front of millions, and now fights to prove that the fire inside him is still alive. And perhaps that is the greatest lesson of all. It does not matter how many times life knocks you down. What matters is whether you still have the courage to rise while looking forward. So let me ask you, are you going to keep waiting for the perfect moment? Or are you going to start fighting for your own story today? Because anyone who truly wants to change their life cannot continue living as a supporting character in their own destiny. If this story moved you, leave a like right now, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications, because here, every biography carries a lesson powerful enough to ignite something inside you.